spool up to but it's pretty thrust jump to. Hi everyone, hopefully a little action shot there at the start to get everybody's blood going as we get into another one of these table talks and you listen to me drone on for a while. Anyway, today's topic is the 2212 2200 kV motor, which I think is kind of the workhorse motor of park jets. I think that everybody should have probably at least one of these for use in their park jet, especially if you're first getting started off. They're inexpensive, durable, versatile, and really are a workhorse. I know there's guys that actually run them on 4-cell with certain props. Everything I'm going to talk about is based on 3-cell, which is, you know, kind of the recommended starter setup. The nice thing about these is, again, they're inexpensive, but they're very, very versatile. Again, because you can run them on 4-cell, and I've run a ton of props on them on 3-cell, all with you know, varying differences in the flight envelope. So the first part of this video is going to be a bit on the beginner side. So hopefully somewhere in the screen right about now there'll be a caption telling you, if you're not interested in this sort of basic stuff, you can fast forward to where I'll talk primarily about the props. So right now I'm just going to kind of get into the basics of brushless outrunners and what some of these numbers mean to hopefully, if you're just starting off, clarify a few things for you and help prevent some confusion. Again, a big shout out to my friend in the UK, RC Plane Pirate. He's been very, very helpful answering some questions, filling in sort of the blanks of my knowledge of the basic guts of how these outrunners work. Again, I'm not a terribly technical guy, so everything that pretty much that I'm passing on to you, I've learned from other people like RC Plane Pirate, and also just, you know, a lot of time testing these on the bench and experimenting in the field. And hopefully what I'll pass on to you, you know, early on in my park jet career, you know, I'll fully admit I made a lot of mistakes and I wasted money. I'm not talking thousands of dollars, but I wasted money on not matching the right motors or using motors properly, speed controllers, batteries, that all sort of stuff. So hopefully the stuff that you'll learn in this will help you better understand and, you know, get started off in your park jet career without wasting a lot of money fumbling around getting the right motor, prop, all that sort of stuff matched up. But again, I really believe that this is kind of the workhorse of park jets. Tons of motors out there. I'm in this phase right now of testing quad motors, but still this is a good old reliable motor for park jets. All right, so again, the basics of a brushless outrunner is essentially that. There's no brushes inside. If you've got anything touching or grinding on the inside of your motor, then there's obviously something wrong with it. There's two parts essentially. This is an old motor that's a bit burnt. So you have the outside piece, or you often hear it referred to as the bell or the can, which spins around the outside of the inside of the motor, which is called the stator, S-T-A-T-O-R, hence the name Outrunner. So it has a shaft. I will have a blog, I'll mention right now, I will have a blog post supporting this video. So, you know, sometimes if I hold the thing up that, you know, to the camera and you can't see what I'm trying to demonstrate, there'll be still photos in that blog that hopefully will explain it a little bit better. As well, I will have, when I get into the prop stuff, I'm not going to get too down into the weeds about all the amp draw and thrust and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to talk more in generalities about how each prop, you know, what performance you can expect at the field. So yeah, so there's the bell magnets all around the outside of it, which you know, which then spin around the stator. The shaft is secured. There's a small, very, very tiny little grub screw. If you end up bending the shaft on these motors, you can actually replace it. On the bottom in the center there, there's a little C-clip. So if you have the tool or the patience to take that off and then put it back on, you can buy replacement shafts. If you find your shaft is loose or whatever, sometimes that's the first thing to check, is that little grub screw. Okay, so that's the Outrunner part of it. So the inside is called the Stator, and you'll see it's got several arms and wires wrapped around it. Now in the nomenclature, the 2212/6, the 6 refers to the number of wraps of wire that go around each pole. Now it doesn't necessarily mean, like, if I look at this, there's more than 12 wires on each pole, but what that means is that sometimes it could be wrapped with 2 strands. They're just pulling thin wire off a big roll. It could be 2 strands at a time, but 2 strands wrapped 6 times. So that's what the 6 stands for. It doesn't stand for the actual number of wires that you see wrapped around. On this Stator, there's top and bottom. You'll see on the inside there's little closed bearings, top and bottom. So the shaft obviously fits through there, and those bearings allow the shaft to run smoothly. One of the things that will go on these motors, these inexpensive motors, like this Turnigy, is only probably about $10 or $11, and this knockoff one, which I'll talk about here shortly, is, I think I got that for about $5 American. Sometimes these bearings can wear out, and you find your motor running rough, or it's working really, really hard, or it's getting really, really hot. Sometimes where you feel most of the heat build up in your motor is going to be in the bottom, in this base here, because of this this bearing race here at the bottom. So that's where the bearings are. Sorry. All right. So to clear up some confusion, on this label, this is again the Turnigy motor. It says D. Don't worry about what the letter means, but 2826/6 2200 kV. This one says 2212/6 2200 kV. They look a little bit different, but I can tell you from performance, these are essentially identical motors. Okay, Hobby King. Here's where some confusion comes in, and I still see people struggle with it. Hobby King seems to continue to label their motors based on outside dimensions. So if you were to measure the diameter of this bell, it's 28 millimeters, hence the 28. And top to bottom, it's 26 millimeters, hence the 26. If you measure the Stator, this piece right here, it's 22 millimeters wide and 12 millimeters high, hence the 2212. Personally, I think that almost everybody else now in the electric outrunner community, like especially in quad motors and that sort of thing, they use the nomenclature based on the stator size. And personally, I think that makes a bit more sense, because there can be a lot less consistency in sort of the thickness of these bells or cans. But if you're comparing motor to motor and you're using stator size, I think that's a bit more consistent way. So hopefully that clears that up, because I know there's times where people will see, oh, it's a 2826 motor, 2200 kV, and a 2212, so the 2826 must be bigger and more powerful. Well, they're not. Again, it depends on the nomenclature that the vendor and the manufacturer uses. But for our purposes in park jets, 2212, 2826, pretty much the same. Now these two motors, again, like I said, other than price, I find consistently, I get these from Banggood, GearBest, eBay. Like I said, I've seen them as cheap as like $5 US. But obviously you get what you pay for. But I've had very, very good luck with these. They've run strong, they've run durable, and the quality control or the consistency across the motors that I've bought has been very good. Now there are times you're going to find, you buy one of these and you look at my spreadsheet and you think, well, I'm not getting anywhere near that performance, or hey, I'm getting better than that performance. You can imagine that these are mass produced in the thousands, and depending on whether you got good bearings or bad bearings, good wires or bad, magnets, that sort of stuff, it can affect the performance. I've seen these where they've, no matter what I've done, battery, speed controller, anything, I can never get any more than like 25 ounces of thrust out of them. Other times they run consistently strong at 30 ounces plus, or 30 ounces of thrust plus with the exact same prop, just different motors. So quality control sometimes is a bit up and down, but I find consistently that these two are about the best. So some differences, again, this is the Turnigy motor. The Turnigy motor comes with the 3.5 millimeter bullet connectors already attached, and the wire covering, it's kind of a more flexible silicone, so it's a little bit more durable and less likely to snap or break from being brittle. This is again the no-name one. Let's call it the no-name one, 2212. These wires are far stiffer and almost feel like a little bit brittle. So you do have to be a bit more careful when you're bending these wires around when you fit your plane in, so that you don't end up pulling them out. But again, the motor works really, really well. Now, when you buy this motor, it only comes with, or 99% of them, it comes with the X mount, the motor mount, which you'll need to, for most park jets, you'll need to mount on the back, plus the 4 screws. It has, on one side, it has the things are recessed so that when you put the screw in, it should essentially sit flat. If you put it in the wrong way, or you're going to end up with your screw, oops, never works in the demo, you're going to end up with your screw sticking up too far. So anyway, you get the picture. So just make sure you put that on correctly. The other thing that you got to make sure of is that the hole pattern on this way, they're 19 millimeters apart. This way they're 16 millimeters apart, and they are the same on the motor. So just make sure before you start screwing them on that you match those up properly, so that you don't end up getting trying to get a couple screws in and then go, oh, why is this not matching correctly? So it only goes on as properly one way. All right. Make sure put the screws on tight enough, but don't reef them down too hard. If you end up breaking the head off or whatever, and you have to try and get this out of there or drill it out of there, it can be a real hassle, because you'll have to protect the motor or tape it up or whatever, because you don't want to get any little metal filings in there. So just put it in tight enough. I've never used Loctite. If you feel you need to use Loctite, that's fine. I for things that I do Loctite, I bought this from Hobby King years ago. It's just a blue sort of medium Loctite. But consider the fact that your motor is going to be in a pusher configuration, so it's going to be pushing this way against your plane, it's going to be pushing against the mount, and then pushing against the wooden mount. So it's going to take a lot for any of these screws to come loose and cause your motor to fall off, because it's always pushing into the screws rather than pulling away from the screws, if that makes sense. So you can Loctite if you want. I've never Loctited one, and touch wood, I've yet to lose a motor off of the motor mount. You can buy, I suggest that you buy some of these. I'll actually have links down below and in the blog post. You can actually buy little packages where you get the prop collet or the prop adapter, an X mount, and the 4 screws. It's handy to have some of these spare screws, because guaranteed you got big sausage hands like me. You're going to put one of these things in, it falls on the floor, the cat runs away with it, or you can never find the thing. So it always helps to have some of those screws, and maybe an extra of one of these or 2. These are fairly soft, aluminum, and they can get bent, or they're a bit brittle. They can get broken if if you reef on them too tightly, or they get bent. So having a couple spares around will really save your day. These especially, I would have more of these spare than the X mounts, because these are taking more punishment where your prop is connected, and sometimes with park jets, the way the motor mount is, you're going to occasionally have the hard prop strike. This is soft aluminum. These shafts get bent, and they're nearly impossible to bend straight without damaging the threads. Or you have a situation where you have a really hard prop strike, and this bullet nut flies off and goes off into to bullet nut heaven and never to be found again. So having some spares of these and you know, one or two maybe even in your flight box when you go to the field. Believe me, I speak from experience, will save your day of flying. So again, I'll have links to those. Now, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence here, but I have unfortunately seen people put these on the wrong way, and there's really only one correct way for these to go on. This shaft is 3.17 millimeters, so when you buy these, make sure when you're looking at the menu, you buy the 3.7 millimeter size, because they do come in 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter. So you've got this little piece with the hole in it, little cone, and the threads, and that slides down over top of the shaft, just like that. Okay, next piece to go on is this ring, and you can see, hopefully you can see, it's got a flange on the top. The flange goes on the very top. This part will be in contact with the prop. Okay, and then you slide your prop on, and then this nut goes on like that, and you use the nut to tighten it down. What happens is the ring pushes those four little pieces of the cone together to grip the shaft. I use, like if you can get a really thin screwdriver, or even like a small Allen key to slide through there and then twist that on. I've even used nails, small nails or whatever. I know some guys don't like these bullet nuts, and that's fine. Go to the hardware store, find yourself an appropriate sized nut, that you can tighten down with a wrench at the field. Again, you don't want to be reefing on, a million foot-pounds of torque, because what I speak from experience, is you'll end up just shearing the thing right off, or you could end up bending it as you're reefing it. So you want it nice and snug, so your prop is not going to come loose, but it doesn't require Herculean effort to attach that. What this motor does not come with is connectors to connect your motor to your speed controller. Most people, large amount of the park jet community, they use on their 30 and 40 amp speed controllers, which is the very common size in park jets. They use like a 3.5 millimeter female on the speed controller, because a lot of us buy motors that already have these bullet connectors on them. So when you buy these, they normally come with, they come in pairs, so you've got the male and the female. So if you buy a bunch of these, don't ever throw these ones away, because if you buy one of these motors, you'll need them. And then just a little bit of heat shrink to go over the brass connectors, so you don't end up having any bare metal and have a short. All right. So just quick and dirty, the 2200. These are essentially 34 amp motors, which means that as long as you run them so that they're pulling 34 amps or less, they should run forever and a day. Again, bearings and things like that will break down. Outrunner motors are essentially kind of dumb. The 2200 kV means that for every volt, theoretically with no prop on it, theoretically for every volt, this motor should spin 2200 revolutions per minute. Okay, so why these are a bit dumb is that they don't know that they're rated for 34 amps. So if you put a big monster 12-inch by 8-pitch prop on this thing, hook it up to a 3-cell and ramp it up, the thing is going to try and pull the RPM based on the number of volts. It doesn't care about the prop that's on it, and it doesn't care if it pulls more than 34 amps. Essentially, its circuit breaker, if you want, is when it burns itself out. Okay, so it's important to know, based on other people's testing or spreadsheets, that you've got a prop and a battery, and you're providing the right number of volts mixed with right size battery with the right prop and the right speed controller, so that you're running this motor at 34 amps. So whether you're running it on 4-cell, 3-cell, that's an important thing to remember. And so just remember that's what that means. It doesn't mean kilovolt. That's effectively for every volt, it should spin 2200 RPM theoretically, with no prop, with no load. Okay, but again, it will pull more than 34 amps, but not for very long. It'll probably burn itself out. Okay, I think that's enough for the beginner basics. well, just one more thing that I see. Well, actually, two more things. Well, we'll talk about the prop when we get. You have three motors that are three wires that come out of the motor and three wires that come out of the speed controller. So you hook all these things up, and you start it up, and your motor is spinning. You've got your prop mounted correctly, but the motor is spinning in the wrong direction. That's a very simple fix. Obviously, safety first. Chop the power, probably disconnect the battery as well, just so something doesn't, especially if you got the prop on. I don't like to do any of the mucking around with a prop on, because you never know when something could go screwy, and if you got a prop on there, you could really hurt yourself. So the motor's spinning in the wrong direction. All you do is you take two wires, any two wires, doesn't matter what color they are, what color heat shrink you have on them, anything else. If it's running in the wrong direction, you just take two of the wires, you disconnect them, and then you swap them into the two different, into the two part places you want to plug them from, and then hook the battery up, start it up again, motor should spin in the correct direction. Okay, that's exactly how simple it is. So if you run into a problem with your motor running in the wrong direction, it's all you have to do. Any two wires, pick any two, doesn't have to be, color doesn't matter. Okay? All right, so just basics, just some quick basics on the prop before we get into prop performance. I purposely highlighted this one. Hopefully you can see in orange. You probably can't read the letter. Most props have the letters written on the front of them. So this is 6x4. It's a 6-inch prop, or around 6 inches with a 4 pitch. Normally higher in pitch. You should get top end speed, better top end speed if the prop can spin it. Lower pitch, you get better acceleration. What these numbers are important for you is, especially if you're a beginner, is always mount the prop so that the numbers are facing the direction of travel. So it's a little bit confusing at first, because we're mounting our motors and our park jets backwards, but this is the direction of travel. Okay, pretend this is your plane. Your motor is going to be traveling that way. So make sure that you have the numbers mounted facing the direction of travel. Now, if you look at a prop blade, it's essentially like an airfoil. So you've got a thicker leading edge here and a thinner trailing edge. So, pardon me, the way that this should spin is obviously the leading edge should turn, and as the leading edge turns, this airfoil creates the lift/thrust that you want out of your propeller. Okay, so you'll get used to looking at a prop, and without even worrying about the numbers, you'll know where the leading edge is, and the leading edge should always lead the way as you're turning the prop, whether you're this way or this way. Okay, so if you are spinning it the wrong direction, you may feel some air coming out the back. That's not a good way to test it. You may get some thrust, but you're probably not going to get enough thrust to fly your plane. So that's something to get to learn and get used to about your props. All right, so now we're on to part two. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about many of the props that I've run and sort of the flight experience that I've had. Now, most of these props, and I'll be specific about which props I would use, the 40 amp speed controller. Most of these props work just fine with a 30 amp speed controller. I don't work for Hobby King, I don't work for Turnigy, but if I had to pick a workhorse of speed controllers, it would be this one, the Turnigy Plush. They're a little bit more expensive maybe than the knockoffs and no names. I've seen guys unfortunately get burned. They buy one of these no-name packages off eBay, looks super cheap. For for $10 they throw in a prop and a speed controller, and unfortunately the speed controller probably is complete garbage. This is kind of the if you've got a bad speed controller, you're just going to have a bad day. Your motor's not going to run properly. You're probably not going to get good power to your servos. The good thing about these, I've had fantastic luck with Turnigy Plush since I switched them. And believe me, again, like I mentioned, I wasted a lot of money on uber cheap no-name speed controllers at the start. I've run on all my planes for years. I run 6 servos, so the battery elimination circuit in here, which helps provide power to the servos, will power 6 servos with no problem at all. I've never had any problems with brownout. and they're just good, solid, durable speed controllers. I can't say enough. And again, I'm not getting any money back from Hobby King by saying this. They have just worked for me for thousands and thousands of flights. So Turnigy Plush, good name to remember. The main difference, the only real difference between the 30 and 40, obviously the 40 can handle more amps and weight. So if you're trying to keep really light, there's about an 8 gram dip. This is about 8 grams heavier than the 30 amp speed control. Okay, so we'll start with the lowest. All of these except one, this big bad boy right here, these are all 6-inch props. So this is a 6x3 electric sport prop from RC Timer. Sometimes you hear them referred to as this type of prop as EMP, which stands for Electric Model Power. It's a company. TGS, I don't know what that stands for, but that's the brand name they're sold under from Hobby King. And then KMP, which is the brand name that they're sold under at Banggood. So I thought that these were actually original Electric Model Power, but I'm starting to question that. RC Plane Pirate has done some testing with these props, and these are this style of prop is probably his favorite. He's done a great video on props, which I will link down below as well. So anyway, I've got some props coming, the TGS and KMP props, and I'm going to test them head to head on these ones that I get from RC Timer and see if there's any real difference. You can buy these in packages of 5 from RC Timer for cheap. They're less than $1 a prop. The advantage to this is, you know, numbers wise, they're very comparable to most of the other 6-inch props, but I don't find that they give me quite the top end speed as some of the 6x4 and higher pitch props. The great thing is with these is that because they're a lower pitch, a 3 pitch, is that if you're looking for a setup where, you know, you can hammer the throttle and you get a little bit more instantaneous hole shot, you know, because you're doing aerobatics, or you like to get down real low and then, you know, impress the fans by cranking your plane. This will get you out of trouble a little bit faster because it'll spool up a little bit quicker. So good, probably the best hole shot acceleration, the 6x3 electric sport prop. That one's again from RC Timer, and you can get them from other places. This I've already showed you. This is like a knockoff. This is a 6x4 APC style. APC stands for Advanced Precision Composites. It's actually a company that makes some great props. So this is a knockoff from Hobby King. Very popular. I've flown this on this 2200 motor for hundreds and hundreds of flights. Has worked really well. But there are some better props, which I'll talk about soon. These are, again, relatively cheap. You get a pair of them for about $2, and this is probably what a lot of people use with the 2200 motor. It's a great versatile prop. You know, decent acceleration, decent top speed. It's just an all-around decent, you know, really well-rounded prop for the money, which is fairly cheap. So and fairly efficient. All right, this has become my new favorite based on after watching one of RC Plane Pirate's videos and his recommendation. This is a 6x4 APC gas prop, and several videos ago, and I'll leave again a link below, I did about almost a 20-minute discussion on this prop alone, because if I had a prop of the year for 2017, it would definitely be this prop. This works well across all the motors that I use right now, regardless of size and kV. So I'm really loving this prop. It's super stiff. It's actually an APC brand. It's not a knockoff, so it's a bit more expensive. It's about $239 American, but definitely worth every penny that I pay for it. It's got a different blade shape and just a really good prop. Excellent acceleration, top end speed, and because it's stiff and a good shape, is that, you know, when I'm flying it, I'm feeling like, you know, every bit of energy that the motor is developing, I'm turning a very large amount of that into thrust, whereas maybe with a prop like this, you can tell it's louder, and sometimes I'm maybe not getting you know, the energy the motor is producing is not all being turned into thrust. Some of it's being turned in, is being wasted with noise and prop vibration, whereas with this, it's just super efficient. So this is my, again, I think the super prop of park jets for me right now, 6x4 APC gas. If I was to run a 2-blade equivalent, and I couldn't get the 6x4 APC, this is probably the closest. Again, this is one of these electric props, electric sport props I get from RC Timer. This is a 6x5. So top end, it's it's pretty close to the 6x4 APC gas. It is a bit more flexible, so there might be some energy that's getting lost there compared to the gas prop. Because it's a 5 pitch, which is the highest pitch of all the props that you know, that I might run, it doesn't spool up as fast. It's kind of like, if you relate it to your car, it's like you put in your car into too high a gear, you know, too soon. You hammer the throttle, and you know, it's got pretty, you know, it's moving forward, but it takes it a little bit longer to sort of wind out until you're up at top speed, compared to you know, the 3 or 4 pitch props. But top end speed, if you know, if I didn't have the 6x4 APC gas, this is definitely one that I would use. And it's, again, cheap. You can get them in bunches of 5 for less than $5 from RC Timer. Okay, this is the last two-bladed prop. This is a bit of a bad boy 7x3 electric prop from RC Timer. I know there are some guys out there that like to swing 7-inch props. This is really, really amp hungry. You know, it's, again, a very big prop for this motor to turn. This is definitely a motor that you'd want to use a 40 amp speed controller with, and you'd want to use good throttle management, because it pulls right up to 34 amps. On the bench, it was kicking out like 1,100 grams of thrust, but I don't see that at the field, because I think what's happening is, as you're speeding up, you know, you've got this big wide paddle of a prop blade here, and as you're speeding up, it's creating more and more drag as it's going faster and faster, just from this prop blade, you know, being wider this way and also wider this way. Mid-range, it's actually pretty efficient, and it almost feels like, you know, you're flying around 50-60% throttle. It seems to act almost like a flywheel, because this prop weighs about 15 grams. Most of the rest of the props, two-bladed props, weigh about 5 grams. So it's kind of like, as it gets spinning, it creates its own, you know, perpetual energy sort of thing. So mid-range, not too bad. Fairly soft feel, sort of in that mid-range. Not real, you know, when you hammer the throttle, even though it's got a low pitch, it doesn't spin up as quick as a 6x3 because it's a longer prop. But you know, it gives you a bit more softer feel. One thing to note is, on the back here, it comes with spacer rings, and to get this thing to fit properly, I needed to use, you know, you get all these spacer rings with your props to snap into the props to make them fit snugly on these prop adapters. I ended up having to put 3 of the gray rings from the 6x4 electric props into this to get it to fit snugly. So word to the wise, when you get all these props, or if you break a prop, or a prop is no longer usable and you can pop the spacer ring out without damaging it, pop it out, keep those in a little baggie, because you never know what you might be in a situation where you need to use those. So it makes sense to hang on to those if you want to experiment with a prop. So anyway, that's the 7x3. And again, not all park jet designs you're gonna be able to spin this. So, you know, before you want to use this setup, make sure that your park jet can actually spin it. It has wide enough prop slot. Otherwise, you can chop your plane in half pretty quickly. So, all right, the last two, these are 3-blade props. Obviously, this is a Master Airscrew 6x4x3. If I had a prop of the year for 2016, it was probably this one. Although this is kind of an RPM limited prop for me. Once I started trying to put it on motors at probably above 2600 kV, as I started to get diminishing returns, it would pull a lot more amps, but I just wasn't seeing any sort of increase in thrust. But for this 2200 motor, in the RPM range that it runs, it seems to be really well suited. If you're looking, you know, top end, even though it's a 3-bladed prop, top end, it's, you know, it's kind of in the ballpark with the 6x4 APC gas. it gives you a bit softer feel, you know, when you're flying around mid-range and stuff. So things don't happen. You know, it almost feels like you've got expo on your throttle if you want. You know, when you're making throttle adjustments, things happen a little bit softer and a little bit more slow. It's not maybe quite as crisp as like a two-bladed prop in, you know, any of the pitches that I've run. But you know, really good. It's quite quiet. It actually makes a bit of a different noise. It actually almost sounds more like a closer to an EDF than like a two-bladed prop. But you know, it's good prop, nice and strong and stiff, very well balanced. Expensive though. They're about $6 American. Pardon me, closer to $9 by the time I get them shipped to me. But still a very good prop. You know, depending on the plane or depending on the flight experience that you're looking for. 6x4 APC or master air screw, and again, you can run this one on a 30 amp speed controller. This is the only other prop where you'd want a 40 amp speed controller, and again, I don't even know if you can get these. I just played around with this. I'm assuming this was a quad prop. I got it from Banggood. It's a 6x4x3, a Gemfan 6x4x3 bullnose. It creates one heck of a lot of thrust on the bench. Again, I think just over 1,000 grams of thrust, but it's pulling right at 34, maybe just above 34 amps. So you'd have to be careful on the throttle. But again, because it's got a pretty wide blade, is that as you get up to full throttle, I think it's causing quite a bit more drag. Yeah, it's, you know, I picked it up to see if it would be a cheaper equivalent to the master air screw prop. Performance-wise, I would say very close. But efficiency-wise, this is definitely a much amp hungrier prop. So it's going to be a little bit, you know, it's going to make your motor work a little bit harder, make your speed controller and your battery work a little bit harder. But again, if you don't want to spend, you know, $7 or $8 on a master air screw prop, and you can find something similar to this, it's, you know, it's good. Again, just be a little careful at the top end with your throttle. Okay, so those are the props and sort of the flight experiences. Again, if you want the more specific numbers, I'll have a link to a spreadsheet that I keep. So a couple things that you want to do, especially this is kind of taking a step back to the beginner side and then maybe more advanced. Get yourself a prop balancer. This I think is a Dubro one. I've had it for years. I'll have a link to one from Hobby King. They're about $7. I'm not going to go into detail on how to balance a prop. Just put in, you know, how to balance a RC prop or whatever in the search window in YouTube, and you'll get tons and tons of videos by guys way smarter than me on how to balance a prop properly. I will say these these sport props, these are notoriously badly balanced, so you want to make sure you balance these before you put them on any motor, because especially when they're at a high kV, if they're out of balance, you know, it's going to be really noisy, and also the vibration can really damage your plane, the foam in your plane. So spend the $7 or so very early on and learn how to properly balance your props. It'll be well worth your money, because they're run quieter, more efficiently, and you'll get more power for your buck. This is another gadget that I wish that I had purchased one of these much earlier in my park jet career. This is a watt meter. I got this one from Hobby King years ago. I don't think it's available anymore, but I'll have a link to one now you can get from Banggood, which is actually it takes up to 150 amps. What this will do, there's a lot of stuff on here that's, again, beyond my technical abilities, but essentially all you have to do is you buy it. It has wires coming out of it, and you put, you know, the battery leads. It has a source and load, so you put the battery leads on the correct end, put it in between your battery and your motor, and then when you run your motor, you know, if you want to play around with different props or maybe a 4-cell battery or something like that, it'll tell you exactly how many amps your motor is pulling with that battery and prop and motor. Okay, so when you consider, you know, you spend 10 or 12 bucks for one of these, it's the same price as one of these brand new motors. I'd rather buy one of these because it tells you exactly what your prop, your motor, your speed controller, and your battery are giving to you. So You may see numbers different than what I have on my spreadsheet, or what somebody else on a forum said, oh, you know, I got fantastic numbers on this motor, blah, 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 blah. Well, again, maybe they got one that was made on a Wednesday by the top performer at the factory or something. But this tells you exactly what's going on with your power system, so there's no doubt. So you can know if you're pushing your motor too hard, or maybe it's got more there. Maybe you can try a different prop to get, to push it a little harder. And it also allows you to make sure that you're selecting the right size speed controller and the right size battery, which are also very important, especially the batteries, because the batteries now are becoming far more expensive, and for some of us, like here living in Canada, they're getting harder and harder to get because a lot of vendors just won't ship anymore, or the government here won't allow them into the country unless you're a vendor. So you don't want to be going through burning up a bunch of speed controllers, motors, because things can get real expensive real quick, or real dangerous real quick if something catches on fire. So strongly consider, if you want to do your own playing around with props and motors and things, invest in one of these little watt meters, because it'll save you a lot of money and tell you exactly what's going on with your power system. Alright, so again, I appreciate your patience. I know I've probably rambled far too long, as I usually do. Please check out all the links below. Please check out the supporting blog post, because it'll have a lot more better pictures that are easier to see than me holding stuff up to the camera, and a bit more background. Also, if I have forgotten something I wanted to cover in this video, I will have it filled in the blog post. Plus there'll be tons of links to stuff, and including the spreadsheet if you want the very specific numbers on all these props. So thanks very much for watching. Blue skies, calm winds to everyone. Park jet noise, the other sound of freedom. Take care.